Delmarva Today with Don Rush.
State Senator Sarah McBride has announced her bid for Delaware's lone House seat, and it comes as the incumbent, Lisa Blunt Rochester, has decided to make a bid for the Senate seat, now being vacated by Tom Carper. You're listening to Delmarva Today. This is Don Rush. The Democrat is seen as the top contender in the race, and if successful, she would be the first transgender to become a member of Congress. But she would also face a highly divided and partisan House of Representatives, where Republicans hold a narrow majority with a strident right-wing caucus. Earlier this week, we talked with her about the issues and the campaign. You're running for Congress. Tell me a little bit about that announcement and why you decided to take the plunge.
Sure. So yesterday we announced my candidacy for Congress, and in the 24 hours since, I've just been incredibly energized and motivated by all those who reached out to share their support, to say they want to volunteer, to donate to our campaign through sarahmcbride.com. You know, I'm running for Congress because now more than ever we need effective and thoughtful leaders in Congress. We have to make sure that government works better for workers and families, especially when hard times hit. And we need leaders who are both bold and build bridges all at the same time, because I've seen that that's the only way to create lasting change. That's how I've governed in the Delaware General Assembly, which is how I got paid family and medical leave over the finish line here in the Delaware State Senate. And that's how I'll govern in Congress, as someone who's fighting for real and lasting change, rolling up my sleeves, diving into the details, and working with anyone, because that's what the people of Delaware deserve.
In terms of the issues that you want to see in Congress, obviously the things like reproductive rights, disinformation, that kind of thing. Tell me then a little bit about those priorities.
Well, sure. Those are some of the issues that I've worked on in the Delaware State Senate. I worked to pass paid family and medical leave. When we started out, political observers said that it would take a decade or more, if ever, to bring Democrats and Republicans, unions, and small businesses together to get that done. We were able to do it in 2 years. I passed legislation helping to combat disinformation by creating media literacy standards in our public schools. I've worked to protect the right to choose. That's all in the Delaware State Senate. In Congress, I'm going to be focusing on building on the progress that we've seen here in Delaware, not just by building out paid family and medical leave and investing in the most robust benefit possible for Delaware workers, but also to guarantee affordable early childhood education so that every family can get child care for their kids. I'm going to be fighting to protect a woman's right to choose and enshrine abortion rights in our federal laws, just as we've done here in Delaware, so that our state is never at risk of losing that health care for people within our borders. I'm going to work to combat gun violence and pass the kind of legislation we've been able to pass here in Delaware, because ultimately, while we can ban assault weapons here in Delaware, in a small state, we need federal actions to keep assault weapons from coming in across state lines. So I'll be fighting for gun safety in Congress. And then finally, in order to protect our environment, in order to ensure a sustainable future, we need federal action. And while I've worked here in the General Assembly to pass green initiatives, ultimately we need Congress to build on the progress of the Inflation Reduction Act and to help us combat climate change. Those are the issues I'll be fighting for in Congress.
Now, Congress is going to be a lot different than the Delaware State Senate, as we've already seen with the Republicans, who are now at least currently in control of the House. Perhaps they might be in the future. We have obviously the filibuster rule in the Senate, which makes it very difficult to get lots of the kinds of legislation you're talking about. That's going to be a much, much different atmosphere. How do you see yourself adjusting to that atmosphere?
Well, there's no question that Congress is different than the General Assembly, although I'm optimistic that the Democrats will regain control of the House of Representatives. I'm confident that we'll retain control of the U.S. Senate, and I believe that we're going to increase support to remove the filibuster for critical initiatives. And I believe that Joe Biden's going to get reelected. And so I do believe that come 2025, Democrats will control Congress. But, you know, when I got elected to the Delaware General Assembly, people wondered whether we'd be able to work together still and get things done. And I'm proud to say that every bill that I have introduced and passed up to this point has been passed with bipartisan majorities, and that includes major Democratic initiatives like paid family and medical leave. And so I'm used to rolling up my sleeves, diving into an issue, and finding common ground with people who might disagree with me on every other issue, but we're able to work together on something that we find we have in common. And I've seen that time and time again. We have more in common than divides us. And yes, the challenges are significant. Yes, Congress is a mess. But if we have any chance of making Congress work better for people, we've got to elect individuals, leaders, who have a track record of bringing people together and actually delivering results. And that's what I've done throughout my life, even before the Delaware, being in the Delaware State Senate, certainly what I've done in the State Senate and what I'll do in Congress.
Because it does seem to me that on Capitol Hill, this is a zero-sum game. That is that you either win or you lose. At least that's certainly the approach that's been taken by the Republican Party. I mean, that's a tough one to get through.
Listen, I think that that's absolutely true for the issues that we see on the evening news and in the headlines, but I actually believe that there are a lot of issues where Democrats and Republicans are able to come together. And time again, we'll see Congresswoman Lisa Blunt Rochester, Senator Coons, Senator Carper introducing initiatives that are bipartisan. Look, when Joe Biden got elected president, he said he was going to bring people together and do big things. And people laughed at that suggestion. But now, 3 years later, yes, not only did we pass the most significant investment in climate change, indeed on a party line vote, but Joe Biden was also able to pass the first gun safety bill since the 1990s with bipartisan support, and the most significant investment in infrastructure since the 1950s with a bipartisan vote. And so I think we are, I think we're too quick to dismiss our capacity to get things done. I have seen throughout my life, I've seen throughout my career, that nothing is truly impossible. And indeed, when you get past the noise and the far right-wing imposed culture wars, and you actually focus on real tangible issues, there's opportunities there for progress.
What do you think your candidacy means, and if you're successful, for the transgender community? Because it's come under attack a number of different ways across the country and even in Congress itself.
There's no question that diversity in government is important, but I'm not running to be the transgender member of Congress. I'm running to be the member of Congress from the great state of Delaware that's focused on delivering progress on all of the issues that matter to people up and down the state of every background. Having said that, there is no question in my mind that having a member of Congress who also happens to be trans, doing the hard work, rolling up their sleeves, being thoughtful and being effective, that just that sheer presence of that kind of leader can have an impact on fostering cultural change, of diversifying people's understanding of the diversity in our society, of who LGBTQ people are, and ultimately, I believe that helps to create change. But my day-to-day focus is going to be on doing the job of being a member of Congress from Delaware. And none of the other things matter if I don't do that part well.
You have often talked about your own experience of coming out. Give me a sense about what that was like, because I think it's important for people to see others as human beings first. What was that moment like for you? Where were you? And can you tell that story? Because I know you've told it before.
Sure. I came out as trans about 10 years ago, a little over 10 years ago. My, how time flies. I came out to first my parents, then close friends and family, and then ultimately on the final day that I was serving as student body president at American University in Washington, D.C., I came out at the end of my term there in a public note that spread like wildfire. And when I was struggling with coming out, and as I was coming out, I feared rejection in every sense of the word. My family and I feared rejection in every sense of the word. And as someone who wanted to do work that I love, live in a community I love, and find love, I thought I was giving up any opportunity to find and pursue those things. But in the last decade plus, I've seen that change is possible. I've witnessed significant progress here in Delaware and nationally. I cut my teeth advocating for a landmark non-discrimination here in the bill here in the Delaware General Assembly when I was still in college. We were able to pass that, and I was proud to serve as the primary spokesperson for that effort. I then went and worked at the federal level to advance equal rights legislation, including as the National Press Secretary at the Human Rights Campaign. And I worked through Democratic administrations and Republican administrations doing that advocacy work. And so I know what it's like when you have the reins of power, and I know what it's like when you're out of power. But in both of those instances, I believe I've demonstrated a capacity to move the needle and advance the ball and get things done. And then when I ran for the Delaware State Senate, in 2020, there were people who thought that a candidate like me couldn't win, even in a blue district. But ultimately, we worked hard. We had incredible support, and my candidacy performed the exact same as every other Democrat on the ballot in the general election. We were able to win the primary for an open Senate seat. First time it had been open in 40 years with 90-some% of the vote. I saw that Delaware voters are fair-minded, that they're judging candidates based on their ideas and not their identities. And I think time and time again we see some cynical political observers try to suggest that the time isn't right and that people aren't ready for this policy or that candidate. But I think it undersells and undervalues Delaware voters to think that they care more about my gender than they do who's going to deliver for them. And I've seen time and time again throughout my life. I've been to every town in this state throughout my life. All nearly 60 towns and municipalities, towns and cities in Delaware. I've met the people up and down this state that I'm going to be talking with throughout this campaign, and I know they are good, decent people, and they're looking for candidates who can deliver.
In her campaign video, she took aim at the divisions now emerging in the country.
Too many politicians want to divide us, to tell us that teachers, doctors, even our own neighbors are the enemy. Blocking out the noise and focusing on what actually matters isn't easy. It takes guts and a backbone.
So what do you mean by that?
An effort to distract from their lack of agenda and their policy failures. We've seen an effort to try to scapegoat people, whether we're talking about LGBTQ people, whether we're talking about the targeting of doctors through the COVID pandemic, whether we're talking about the targeting of teachers now through the inflamed culture wars that the MAGA Republicans are fostering. Time and time again, we're seeing extreme right-wing politicians seek to scapegoat people in our society. And that is not our politics at its best. It's not this country at its best, and it's dangerous. And I think that throughout my time in advocacy and now in elected office, I've brought humanity to issues. I've rooted my politics in what I call the politics of Mr. Rogers, a sense of kindness and grace and compassion. And I truly believe that empathy is the most powerful human emotion. And when we allow ourselves to break through the noise, we focus on what actually matters, and we root our efforts in kindness and grace and compassion, that we can reach people who we're not yet reaching. That doesn't mean we're going to convince every person. It doesn't mean that, some of these politicians aren't going to stop their dirty tricks and their negative campaigning. But ultimately, I think that you reach the vast majority of people if you lead with kindness and grace and compassion.
By the way, you see yourself working with someone like Marjorie Taylor Greene or Boebert? They've been pretty out there.
Well, look, I'm not expecting that they're going to be eager to work with any Democrats, those individuals, but I think there are Republicans who are absolutely willing to work with one another, with Democrats, work with people across the aisle, and I look forward to collaborating with anyone who's willing to come to the table. I just don't anticipate those are two names that are going to be eager to work with any Democrat.
Turning to the politics of this in terms of your running, what kind of endorsements do you expect? There's some suggestions you might get some other competition as well from the Democratic bench. What's going on with the politics there in terms of endorsements and what the establishment is looking at?
Yeah, well, first off, I'm not in the game of political prognostications in terms of this race. So what I can speak to is the incredible outpouring of support that we've been able to see for this campaign over the last 24 hours. We were able to launch this campaign with a wide coalition, a diverse coalition, North and South, people of every background, folks in elected office, folks who are advocates, folks who are community leaders, folks who are involved in the party. We were able to launch with a broad coalition. That includes folks like the support of Attorney General Kathy Jennings and State Auditor Lydia York. It includes the support of many of my colleagues in the Delaware General Assembly. It includes organizations like the Human Rights Campaign, the Equality PAC, LPAC, and End Citizens United, which is focused nationally as the premier organization trying to combat the corrosive influence of money in politics. We were able to announce the support of labor leaders, people like Nelson Hill with the UFCW, the largest private sector labor union in the state, who said that I've been a steadfast champion for working families in the Delaware State Senate, and that he's excited to work with fellow labor leaders to win this race for our campaign in September and November. And so we were able to announce with a broad coalition of supporters. That much more came in. I'm proud that we've raised that in the first day, thanks to the generosity of supporters, we were able to raise more than $300,000 by 6 p.m. yesterday. That's really a historic influx of support. So from those endorsements, from the incredible generosity of donors across the state of Delaware, we were able to really demonstrate that this campaign has momentum and is ready to win in the fall of 2024.
By the way, have you had any contact with Lisa Blunt of Rochester? I know she has not issued any endorsements. You have any sense about where she's at on this one?
Listen, I think I'm not going to speak for anyone else. I think folks need to speak with, reach out to others if they want to characterize where they are or what their position. But I'm proud to have had a long working relationship with Lisa, friendship with Lisa Blunt Rochester. She's been an incredible member of Congress. She leaves huge shoes to fill as she moves to the United States Senate, which I'm confident she will come January 2025. And I'm just so grateful that Delaware will continue to be able to benefit from Congresswoman Blunt Rochester's joy and grace and leadership.
Finally, just want to return to the issue of diversity, because that's an issue that has come up certainly before this country. We've seen certain backlashes against it, obviously, in some of the states. Where do you see this country in terms of where we are? Because it did seem on the one hand, for instance, in terms of the LGBTQ community, there was a lot of progress being made, certainly in the African-American community with civil rights and so on. And now we seem to be getting this sort of this backlash, certainly at the state levels and perhaps even within Congress. How do you see this country where it is today?
Well, look, I think there's no question that this is a critical hour for our country, and that the stakes are high. Every 2 years, politicians say that this coming election is the most important election of our lifetime, and the truth is that the 2024 election is the most important election of our lifetime. And that's because when you're just one election away from election deniers getting the keys to government, when you're just one election away from those who seek to bully children and families and parents getting full control of the federal government, when you're just one election away from democracy being at risk, that means that every election becomes the most important election of our lifetime. And so there's no question in my mind that the stakes are high. But I also believe that the challenge before us is not whether we are aware of the stakes. I think we are. It's whether we'll have the hope necessary to see it through. And I get that it's in vogue to be hopeless right now. It's in vogue to be cynical. And I understand there are a lot of problems in our politics. There are a lot of challenges that we face. But I think if you look at history, the reality is that every previous generation has been called to face seemingly insurmountable odds even greater than the ones we face today. And so I believe that if we continue to persevere, if we continue to fight for it, we'll summon the light, we'll find our hope, and we'll move fairness and kindness forward. It's always been in our biggest challenges that we take our most significant steps forward as a country. I truly believe that. And so I think that the stakes are high. I'm not ignorant to what's at stake for our country. I'm not ignorant to the challenges that we face. But the reality is we've conquered seemingly insurmountable odds before. That means we can do it again.
We've been speaking with State Senator Sarah McBride, who is running for the Democratic nomination for Delaware's lone congressional seat. You're listening to Delmarva Today. This is Don Rush.
Delmarva Today with Don Rush.